I've begun the life of chronic sleep deprivation and catabolism and fingers and bums. It's been pretty good.
Hey, man. I mean, if that isn't the shit, I don't know what is.
I'm sure it's the same with you. Like,
yeah, mostly fingers and bums. Although I was doing that before I even got my doctorate. So
just off the payroll for it.
Maybe unpack that, or is there anything you think that you did that led to that, or anything you do differently, or just advice for people?
It's called Matt Ogus.
Matt Ogus.
Yeah, that's the pretty much the whole catalyst for me being known. And then I'd say Bryce Lewis, and then I'd say Omar Isuf. Without them, I'm
That's
pretty
it.
much just some guy with a hat. Yeah.
All right. So. Well, Eric, it's been great chatting. I can remember exactly when I first heard of you, and it was through Matt Ogus.
So told you.
There's a video of Matt Ogus not wearing very many clothes, and you're standing in a room with him with the rest of the 3DMJ crew, and that was when I saw that video and I thought, I'm going to email that man and ask him if he'll coach me. And that was how I first.
And Matt Ogus didn't respond. You're like, well, email that other guy in that video.
He looks all right as well.
He's in quite good shape, isn't he, Matt Ogus?
Yeah, man, he's got a fantastic physique.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, how did you first start coaching him?
Coaching him, well, we had just started 3DMJ, which is our online coaching business, in the end of 2009, and we had been doing our thing through all of 2010, and I didn't know who it was at the time, but Jeff and I actually went to a show in October 2010 locally in Sacramento, and we saw a kid with really good muscularity, but who was probably 20 plus pounds over stage weight, and we both looked at each other and said, he'd do really well if he was lean. And I didn't know it, but that was Matt Ogus who we saw. And then a few months later, I can't remember if we actually got an application on our website, or this was early days, or if we got a phone call or just a direct email. But anyway, Matt had decided he wanted to compete, and his previous approach didn't get him in shape. And when I actually talked to him, he was just like trying to grow into the show. So he was just adding volume and trying to eat at maintenance and trying to like recomp into shreddedness. Doesn't work, by the way. So anyway, so I actually called him up and he said, hey, I talked to, and he mentioned a bodybuilder who trained at the same gym I did. He's like, hey, he told me to get in touch with you guys. And he was, I think, only like 16 weeks out from his show. So we had to kind of get the ball rolling real quick. Took a pretty aggressive approach, and he responded really well to the approach we took. And I had to increase his calories from the start just to prevent him from losing too quickly. And that was his 2011 Matt versus YouTube series. And it went really well. We had a really good coaching relationship. He responded great. He completely destroyed his physique from 2010. Competed at like 155 pounds as well, compared to I think he was on stage at like 190, and you could definitely tell the difference. And maybe like 180, I can't remember. But anyway, he was in great shape, and it was just a big eye opener for him because he understood energy balance, and he started following a much more straightforward, progressive overload based approach versus kind of more of a just pump and feel and get sore, kind of more subjective approach to bodybuilding. And that's when he really started to push the YouTube channel. And I remember this was early days in YouTube. He asked me, hey, do you mind when I do my check-ins if instead of just sending you pictures, I send a video of me going through it? And I think I'm going to make a vlog of this. And I was like, sure, yeah, man, whatever. And then like one of the weeks I was paying attention, I just noticed that the view count was like thousands, which is the equivalent of like tens of thousands today in the modern YouTube channel. And I was like, what is going on here?
Which normally only happens when you have a one-on-one client that's a bit of a creep and just keeps rewatching the video because they just
coach. They just have it on read. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, and this was at least twofold in excess of me creeping my clients like I normally do to see the view count. So anyway, the view count was huge, and then I showed the rest of the coaches like, what's going on here? And then it was only man, it was a matter of months before we started getting so many client requests through DMJ that we could not satisfy them all. We created a Skype program to try to deal with the overflow. We had at one point a waiting list of over 300 people, and Matt blew up online. And then in his off season, he asked me to like, hey, would you come on the channel? But we both live in Sacramento, and I know my audience would love to hear me ask you fitness related questions. And that's those kind of infamous videos of me sitting outside of Rubio's with Matt, or outside of the Powerhouse gym, standing there while ambulances go by and we're trying to ask questions with classic 2012 quality. So that was when I was first aware to people on the interwebs. I think right around that time.
That was
not that I wasn't doing shit before. That was that was kind of like most people, they get these huge bumps in viewership, and those opportunities are something you can either capitalize on or not, or you can just use the opportunity to look really, really stupid. And I'm glad that I had that opportunity in 2011 and 12, not earlier, because I think that was right around the time I would say that I actually had some value, and there might have been something worth hearing me say. I had just finished, or was just about to finish, my master's. I had been teaching at Bryan College, a associate's degree program, which is kind of like in the States, it's basically like the first 2 years of a bachelor's. So it's an applied associate's degree program for personal training. I'd been teaching there for about 6 months. I had been a personal trainer since 2005, and I'd done, 3 seasons of bodybuilding and a handful of powerlifting meets, and coached, double-digit number of competitors in both sports. So I was, I had cut my chops, if you could say, theoretically and in practice with myself and my clients. And I think I was able to provide some utility, and I'm decent at speaking, probably because of my lecturing experience. So it kind of came together, and that's basically when I became a known quantity in the www world, if you will.
It's such an interesting set of serendipitous things that have happened there as well. Like, if you saw Matt Ogus, he was on your radar, you didn't go over and say like, I think you look quite good, 20 pounds lighter, and put him off. And then the guy in his gym, and I suppose like what you had to offer as well was a message that the fitness industry was really ripe to hear at that time, which was like 2012, golden age of fitness. We're all deep in T-Nation forums and worrying about our leucine timing and like our rep tempo and all this kind of stuff. And I think at that point you've almost like, I think what the message that you kind of started seeding is what's precipitated the big shift in online fitness over the last few years towards like the pyramid, calorie balance, and like the likes of James Smith and so on. I think are kind of the children of that message that's been of like basically a case of, guys, get your priorities in order.
I would, man, that's awesome to hear that, and I'd like to think so. And it's funny, I obviously the only perspective I have is the one through my own eyes, but a lot of the things you're talking about almost felt like me reacting to what I was seeing once I became a known quantity, like putting out science-based information and seeing that there was a hunger for that was cool. And then when we started that Skype program, which was the direct result of us blowing up because we became a known quantity through YouTube, that's when I started. I mean, there was literally a period where I was doing 5 Skype calls with 5 different people per week for a year and a half. And that was starting in, I think, 2011 into 2012. And it was at the point where I remember one morning or one afternoon I was grabbing brunch with my wife, and I had just done one of these Skype calls in the morning here in New Zealand. And she was like, you know what, I bet I could do your Skype calls. Like, I know what you say for each one of these people. And I'm like, it's like they all have the same questions, babe. Like, every single person, they know everything, but they have no ability to put it into an integrated system. They, like, there's all this sciencey information out there, but it's all like these clickbait titles, and they don't know whether having, protein around their training is any more important than progressive overload. It's all just like, this is the next big thing. This is super important. And these people come to me with 100 variables and no idea how to manipulate them. So my the Muscle and Strength Pyramids, the video series I did, some people only think of them as a book. That video series on nutrition that I did was in late 2012.
Just think the camera like under your chin and with a whiteboard like in the background.
Yeah, that's me going into so I'm doing my second master's in nutrition at AUT. That's me going into the little postgraduate meeting room, taking my S3 and putting it on a chair and then going over to the whiteboard. And that's all that was. And I made that series, like, I'd say 80% was just because I knew it would be helpful to people, but a solid 20% of that motivation was because I wanted people to contact me, ask me this question, and be like, just watch this. Like, I'm going to slip my wrists if I have to go through this again. This is the 120th time for me. So that kind of logical construction of that hierarchical importance and saying, like, look, all the shit matters, but some of it doesn't matter at all for your goals, and maybe for your goals it does matter a little more, but it's certainly not as important as this. And if you don't have this in order, don't even think about that. And like, if you don't even know like how many calories are in protein, yet you're worrying about having exactly this amount, post workout, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that became something that I probably sent that video out to half the people who emailed me, messaged me on Facebook, et cetera. And then other coaches started sharing it around because they had the same, say they were doing the same thing I was, So it became something that I was like, wow, there's a need for this, I think at the time the voices in the evidence-based community were like comically like a meme of themselves. Like there was myth busting and nothing else, or science is marketing. So it was like you said, the T Nation article where it's like post-workout nutrition, the reason why you're not Mr. Olympia. It's like basically like the kind of standard
meme. I read so many of those articles, just thinking, oh no, I need to buy more leucine now. I need to get more of the hydrolyzed casein, and 100%.
Gareth, just before we continue, can you hear a high-pitched noise?
No.
No. There is one in my room. I don't know where it's coming from, but I just want to check that it's not.
So Johnny lived next to a guy who was learning the tin whistle and would practice religiously for like 3 hours a day, exactly whenever Johnny would record a podcast or a video. And I think it's someone who is a keen subscriber of the Propane channel and waits until there's a live stream and is like, right, quick, it's my time to shine, my time to get the exposure that I deserve. Yeah,
the tin whistle exposure. That's how he's gonna make it.
So I think what you've described there, Eric, is like almost like an organic scaling of the way that you disseminated the way that you spread your seed around, which is like you have you a one-on-one coach, you got a kind of law of loose ties, uptick in exposure from the content you were producing. Suddenly there's a big inflow of new inquiries, new clients. You're handling as many as you can. You're responding to the same questions on Skype. So you make a video, you paste the video out, and then that kind of evolves into how can I send this message out at more scale and outgrow my own capacity for how many clients I can deal with in a day. And so I think we were quite lucky that we were working with you just before that kind of inflection happened and you stopped taking on new clients.
Yeah, so there was a number of that all led to that. So my second master's, which I did in New Zealand, I was at the peak coaching I'd ever done numbers wise online at the time as I was actually doing my master's, and that was as hard as it sounds. And I realized this was just simply not sustainable. So as soon as I was able to secure a scholarship for my PhD, which I was like really betting on, I was like, right, that I need to figure out what's the most amount of clients I can essentially stop working with, so that I can still make ends meet with the PhD scholarship. And I think a year into my PhD, I could come down from the mid 40s down to the mid 20s. So I basically got cut in half. And that wasn't from me like being like, guess what, doing a PhD, you can deal with your eating disorder on your own. It was more like I just stopped taking on new people, like you guys said. And so essentially, if you do a good job as an online coach, in my opinion, you'll have a large stable of people who will keep coming back to work with you, especially if you're in kind of like strength athlete community, because a lot of people don't necessarily need help with the off season if they're a bodybuilder. A lot of people don't necessarily need help when they're not 12 weeks out from a meet or something like that if they're a powerlifter. It's typically when you really need some objectivity and some guidance and someone who is not you to deal with the curveballs that life throws at you and to kind of see your blind spots, because they're blind spots. So I would have this rotating stable of athletes I would work with, but then with nothing new coming in. So it was just slowly shrinking. But it wasn't until I'd say 2016 where I was down to just a handful of the people I'd like. Right now, I can think of a single digit number of people who could hit me up for coaching depending on what they're doing in their life. And what that results in is me basically having a handful of people at any given time. And I found that for my personal mission statement and the impact I was trying to have in the community that had given me so much, which is like the bodybuilding and strength community, if I wanted to give back and pay it forward, I found that I felt like I could have a much larger impact doing more things like the muscle and strength pyramid videos. And that also, wow, this is something scalable. Like obviously if I get rid of all my online clients and I just make YouTube videos, I would be making YouTube videos, in a box in the street, because there wasn't an income stream. So Andrea approached me with the idea of making the pyramid videos, because I made a training pyramid video in 2015 into books, which we released at the end of 2015, and those were wildly successful compared to what I expected. I expected like people, they've seen the videos. This is just the nerdy version of those with references. Of course, like I overwrote them. Looking at them now, they're not overwritten. They're just good books. I'm pretty proud of them. But compared to what we had planned, which was basically just a transcription of the videos and then making it into non-spoken English so it was easy to read and dropping in a few references. They were the same references that I put in the comments of the videos. So they'd be like these pamphlet ebooks. They're overwritten, but they're written appropriately. We're in the second edition now, and we've been translated into Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, Chinese, with Japanese in the works, and hopefully German on the horizon. And they have, I think across all mediums and all languages, we're probably approaching like 50,000 book sales. So it's clearly I didn't do anything wrong there,
Yeah.
But scalability is a huge part of it, and finding a way to make it so that I could make a living from not coaching and doing what I thought was my pathway to making it the biggest impact.
So what was the maximum number of clients you managed one-on-one? 40 something, did you say?
So at my peak, I had 44 people reporting on a weekly basis, and then I was doing on average 4 Skypes per week. So
wow. On top of a master's?
Correct. Yes.
That is a lot.
It was too much. It was too much. The only time I had been more busy than that was a year prior to that, where I had slightly less online clients, but I was teaching 30 hours a week at the Bryan University personal training and I was doing my prep in 2011. And I was doing my first master's in exercise science online, while I was also doing in-person PT with about 10 to 15 clients at the time. That had trickled down.
So really kind of tip the scales.
Yeah, I was burning the candle at every end. And just to add insult to injury, I was preparing for that second master's. So I was actually working on the literature review for my second master's, and to get the stipend that helped me make everything work for that huge move, because it's very expensive to move yourself and your wife and your cats to a foreign country and kind of start over. Especially because now Barb, her job was gone. She was a dog trainer with a full client load. We moved to New Zealand and she had to start over. So that income went away. Anyway, so another thing that I was doing was I was doing grading for an primarily online class at AUT called Enhancing Muscular Performance. So I was like doing a graduate assistantship there. So it was, I mean, a lot of the times people will say that they don't have the time to do something. And it means really they don't have the emotional energy or the structure or the mental energy to deal with it. Like it's just too much. Like they need some downtime. This was the one time in my life, we're talking mid 2011 to mid 2012, where I literally didn't have enough time for things. When you looked at, like I was studying for my master's, I would choose the elliptical with the largest, like, I don't know, podium thing in front of it, because I would put literally my books on it and study while I was doing my cardio, because there's no other time to study. And Barb and I, because she was also dieting for, she was trying to cut down to the 114 class in powerlifting. And then while she was down there, she was like, you know what, I should try a figure show just to see if it's, something I like. And so for the 2/3 of my prep, she was also dieting. So I mean, we did our cardio together. We went on walks in the morning, and then I did more cardio at night to study. So that's the only reason we maintained like a real relationship. Because besides that, we'd eat dinner together, and maybe each night we would have an hour and a half to 2 hours where we'd sit and just like watch Netflix between like 8 to 10 before I went to bed and started it all over again. Because it was get up, complete my posts and stuff for my online class, go to the gym, get back, and go to the gym with my books. So I'd study, get back, prepare, and go to class. Oh, sorry, no. Coach, do my online clients, do my in-person clients, and then go and teach at Bryan College from like 5 to 10. So I teach night classes, come home, and that's it. That was it pretty much every day except weekends. So that was the busiest I'd ever been. And I was like, that's why I didn't compete in bodybuilding until 2019 again, because I did my master's and my PhD, and I was like, I'm not getting on stage again while I do that. So anyway,
burning the
that was the
candle
one
at both
time I
ends
was like
that it's just
absolutely.
It's not good for your physique anyway, is it? Like I've definitely noticed like a similar situation to yourself. Like this weekend, 14-hour shifts, so working 8 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. in the hospital. Calls at 7 a.m., calls at 10, 11 p.m. Like you just end up like, if you can fit training in, quality dwindles, and it's definitely something that, yeah, you're like, I'm going to have to try and take out the lowest yield activities in my life just to be able to find time to eat and to be able to function. And then, so yeah, I can definitely see how it's not a pieing off your clients because you want to, but it's just like, guys, I haven't got the physical capacity to be doing this right now.
Yeah, and man, I something that I've been struggling with my entire second half of my career is learning to say no. Like I went through a period of say yes to everything. I was like Jim Carrey, yes man, and that was really, really valuable for my career. And I had to put in these ridiculous hours, I think, to get to where I am today, to hopefully have the opportunities that I discussed one of them, Matt Ogus, but there've been others, opportunities to come to me and then to capitalize it and to not just, Dunning-Kruger all over myself and fail. So to be in a position to recognize opportunities, see which one aligns with my mission statement, and then capitalize on them and succeed, and more than I failed at, I think was part and parcel of me putting in that time and effort. And I think that's great. Most people will have to do that, especially if they're trying to make it in this very, very crowded space. But once you get set up, your entire focus will, even like your self-identity is all around like, I'm the do everything man. And that is definitely a finite thing. It's not even good leadership, because that's not a healthy way to live. It's not what we want our clients to do. It's not what we want people to do. It's not the way to live your life. So turning that ship is critically important to now start going, right, I've established all these things. I need to put my energy into them, and I need to build what I have, and I need to take care of myself. If I'm out here trying to help others, then I need to, take care of myself first and foremost. And that means you have to start learning to say no to a lot of stuff. And that's not easy. Like when I get someone who I like, who I've worked with before, who needs help, I know I can help them, and they say, hey, can we work together? It takes a lot of effort for me to go, no. It might come across as a simple email, but it's hard for me. And I think I don't have a great batting average with that. Like there's definitely times when I've taken on someone, not been able to give them the effort I wanted, and let them down and let myself down, and that's a kind of a self-correcting thing. It's like I shouldn't have said yes, or doing something that objectively you should be really, really happy about. Like writing a book chapter for a personal training thing, or presenting in a foreign country on talking about bodybuilding and getting to see someplace in Europe or South America or something like that. All these cool things that I've had the opportunity to do purely from, picking shit up and putting it down, which is crazy to me. Sometimes there have been moments where I have not been enjoying it because I've been overstressed, and I think that's like tragic. Like I look at myself and I go, Eric,
like
you love lifting. You have to, like, you should not be unhappy right now.
But you end up resenting the things that are great opportunities because you're so overstretched. And yeah, like letting down a client, there's a bit. For me, obviously, letting down a client, you're like, this is someone who's come to me and they want my help, and I've not been able to serve them. And also, it's a bit of an ego hit because you identify like being the can do everything man, the super productive person that can juggle all these plates, and it's almost like it's an ego hit to say like, actually, I can't manage this right now.
100%. It's the kind of humility building that I wouldn't mind doing if it was in like me doing something like when you think you can get a PR and you miss it and hurt your back, like that's great. It sucks, right? Like you hurt your back, but it reminds you that you're human and that you maybe should be a little more cautious and a little more thoughtful and lead from the thinking part of your brain rather than the feeling part of your brain. But when you do that at someone else's expense, it just like that stuff still keeps me up at night sometimes. So I'd much rather fail myself than fail someone else. Both keep you humble, but one affects other people. So I 100%. Yeah.
I think we went through a similar sort of, like it was around the time we were working with you, and I think we started taking on more and more one-on-one clients, and it got to the point where, like, I was looking back at some videos the other day of us, because obviously I think working with you gave us a model of like, this is what, like our experience from being coached by you was a really positive one. This is what being a good coach is like. So we try to emulate that and copy aspects of it. So video replies at like, 1:30 in the morning. Like I remember forgetting to check in with you or like checking in with you at like crazy o'clock and sort of looking back at the video and thinking, I made no sense in that video whatsoever. You aggressively get to the, you're like, everything's going okay. But what you were saying before about like you because you feel so privileged to have someone ask for help, you're like, yeah, like everyone, more clients the better. And you reach this point where you're like, this isn't viable, and I can't see myself still doing this in a year's time, in 2 years' time. So
very hard to shift that as well, because then you've got loads of grandfathered clients in at really low rates.
Yeah.
And so then you've then got to either like really course correct and change the model of coaching for everybody at once and just let those chips fall where they do, or say like, okay guys, we're gonna have to either increase the rate or drop these people. It's a hard decision.
It's something that I don't hear it ever get spoken about, that everyone's like marketing, sales. But if you eventually figure that out and you have 40 clients paying you on a one-on-one basis as a side thing to the rest of your life, like as you've experienced, Eric, certainly my experience of it was I started to resent it. Like I was to get to the point where I was like, actually, this isn't worth like the knock in health and like the rest of my life. Did you have a moment where you were I know you mentioned you made the YouTube videos, but did you have a moment where you're like, we need to restructure 3DMJ, or we need to stop doing this? Was there a tipping point for it, or was it a gradual?
God. It's more like I had like if you think of like a gear turning and each one of the things being a tipping point, I had like a 20-headed gear. There's so many moments I can remember. I often would be the person who would be the latest adopter out of the coaches for making myself more structured. I remember, you probably don't think of that when you think of me, but like I probably was too accessible and too connected with my clients for a while. I remember there was a moment where Jeff, Brad, and Alberto were only scheduling Skype calls and client reports on their weekdays, and they had their weekends off unless someone was competing. And it took me a full year after all three of them had done that before I started doing that. And if you go a year before that, I was the last one to actually give specific days to clients. But there was these moments where I just got completely overwhelmed, and I was looking up and I was like, how is it that Berto has twice as many clients as me and he's not overwhelmed? Some of that's just Berto's the man when it comes to online coaching and keeping his like, you could ask him any of his people, he knows, like, oh yeah, it's his sister's birthday. I'm like, what?
He also seems like a man that can tolerate a lot of physiological stress.
Yeah, and emotional, and like he can operate in like a sea of chaos and just handle it all, and so anyway, yes, 100%, and just incredibly well managed it all. And I think it's because he operates very big picture and emotionally. Like, he's not incredibly like analytical or point by point, so he can handle the thing. But anyway, over each one of those tipping points that your guys are describing, we created systems around that, and that was good and then bad. So I had a specific day that the client would report in on, and the things, hey, I'll get back to you within 24 hours, and you report. If you report off the day, then now you're with another 7 people who are coming on Tuesday, so that means you're going to get a report back from me after that. So it might be after 24 hours. That's kind of the social contract's been breached, so you're just going to get what you get. And the Google spreadsheets became more specific, make sure I'm getting information I want and not too much, guidelines around the videos they send me, and really it was all about setting boundaries and expectations and structure, so that I got to the point where I could give a very high quality response to someone, look at the spreadsheet, get the information I needed, look back through the email tree, so hey, you're responding all in the same email, look at all their data, and be able to listen to them, watch them, see their lifts or their physique, depending on what, whether they're bodybuilder or powerlifter, and get back to them within 15 minutes, sometimes as much as an hour, like if it was a really big deal, we need to Skype or whatever. But that's kind of like average response time. And you can imagine that, if I got 44 clients, that's on average 6 or 7 clients reporting, basically, or up to 8 clients reporting on 5 to 6 days a week. And that worked great because that's basically a 4-hour day, and then I'm going to go do my master's. But the issue is that just because you've created a system to handle 40 or 45 clients doesn't mean that each one of them, when they start to have problems, and like these problems often bleed outside of the structure, that compounds. So, like, for example, July, when the most of the bodybuilding season occurs, or the holidays, when most people struggle with their nutrition or their goals, or et cetera, and that's when you start noticing, I'm getting a few Instagram messages here, or I'm getting a few Facebook messages here, or I'm getting more emails midweek to ask questions, or now I'm not getting some reports, and I have to actually step outside of my system and follow up with them. I'm not reacting, now I have to be proactive. And okay, now I need to schedule a Skype. We got a big thing going on here, and I got to write some peak week plans, or I got to write a new program, or you got hurt. Like all of those things. You're essentially like, it's almost like an Olympic lifter is in this perfect position with a clean and jerk, and you've maximized your form over 20 years, and you're at the end range of motion, and someone comes in and just like kicks you in the leg, like like not ideal, right? Because sure, you can support 200 kilos overhead, but only if you do everything just right and you've been adapted for 20 years. So there were some times where that house of cards collapsed, and it resulted in me having to work multiple 8 hours a day just to get back on track. And even though that was a rare occurrence, the knowledge that could happen at any moment was this dark cloud that was hanging over me. And I wouldn't want to go on vacations. I'm in New Zealand. I don't want to go out for a day trip and shit like that, because it would stress me out. And I've also got a master's, So the motivation for me to bring that down during my PhD was very strong. And I really like now that basically I can have emotional ups and downs and have my work, my output go up and down with it. I couldn't do that when I had 40 clients. I put on, just like when you're an in-person trainer, you got to show up at the gym and you got to train from, your morning shift, your lunch shift, and your after work shift, and then you got to do your own training session. So we'll still hire you, and that's like that whether you got divorced that day or whether you got in a car accident or not, And the same thing is true with online clients. You got to just still do good work. But now, where I put out books, I do podcasts. I do, like, if I just strip down to the bare minimum and like I'm doing nothing from other books, I'm just doing my article, my video for Mass. And I say no to the podcast for a month, and I just do my weekly podcast with Omar and my bi-weekly one with 3DMJ. It's essentially 10 hours of work a week. That's not optimal. That's not how I grow my business. It's not how I really fulfill my mission statement and help a lot of people. But I can go dark like that for 2 months, and people really wouldn't notice a whole lot. You know, I'd kind of repost some things on Instagram. I'd stay kind of a known quantity, and I've had those moments. You know, like the hard part of contest prep. You know, or hard part of the recovery, or just not really feeling it, and that's okay.
Like that's necessary. Because if 100%. You don't, it sounds like, yeah, if you don't have that give in the system, then there's no room for creativity or for it to actually take a step back and look at the process as a whole. And as you said, like if you packed with clients and you've got someone who drinks a jar of pickle juice the night before his bodybuilding show and gains 10 pounds, you're like, okay, I need to then
real story, by the
derail my evening and and deal with this. It's like absolutely, that's like the red alarm, like klaxon.
Yeah.
So with these, because I remember you recommended a book to me a while ago called The Gift of Imperfection by Brené Brown, and this was very much about setting those boundaries. There was a quote from it. It was like, you cannot practice compassion from a place of resentment, and boundaries are not this like evil thing to like push people away, but it's so that you can then create enough space to be able to operate within the scope that you have without pushing the needle so far that you're in, you know, low fuel mode and end up just, as you said, like being invited to all these great things and having great opportunities, but the whole time, because they've encroached on your boundaries a bit, you're just like, oh, I just want to sleep. I just want to have a bit of a rest. Yeah. How has that impacted your personal life? Because I imagine now, like with the increased exposure, you're getting a lot more people personally with more access to you, and I suppose like previously you might have been able to field emails and private messages on Facebook and that kind of thing, whereas now, like, I imagine the floodgates have opened. How do you deal with that personally?
Yeah, so this is basically, now I'm gonna take you out of the era where I was primarily a coach and also creating content, to now just primarily being what I am, which is a science communicator, I would say. And that was like initially, I think, just kind of the same way it was when you're first with online coaching. You never expect to be in a position to have a consultation every morning, 40 online clients, and a 300-person waiting list. You don't expect that, and that'd be a fantastic problem to have. And in fact, you really shouldn't complain too much about it. The only thing you need to do is just make sure that all that you said, it doesn't become a resentful relationship. It doesn't become this codependent relationship with 45 people. And you actually set up a system to handle that, and you know your limits, you know your boundaries, and you think about scalability. You ask people to pay you what you're worth and what can actually make a living wage. I mean, man, this is totally aside before I'll answer your question. There was a point where we were only charging like $60 a month for online coaching. And I did the math one time, and I was like, if we each have 50 clients, we're making less than the median wage income in the United States, and we're working 80 hours a week. This is crazy. This makes no sense.
There was periods where Johnny and I would fantasize about going to work for Starbucks because it's more than £4 an hour. And we're like, and then you get home, and then you can, there's no stress. You can go to sleep. You don't have to worry about like.
Our first program was £9. That was fully customized, like time with us and everything. I can remember, if you don't mind, like this may be a bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I can remember. So I think we were on like that sort of rate, and I can remember every month you sort of manually sending out PayPal invoices, and me just thinking, like, I remember sitting getting those emails thinking, like, man, this must be like a time-consuming thing to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. So nonetheless, systems need to be improved over time to handle.
But so what I remember like struck me about that was, it never felt at any time like you were doing anything other than just giving the best experience. Because even the email was like, it's like, yeah, Eric, your billing was shit. No, it's like even the email was like, if you can't renew, that's not a problem. Like, I just remember thinking, like, this is such a, I'm dealing with like I don't know, someone that isn't the business almost. But I think that's part of the impression. Because again, like a lot of the advice these days is so money focused, and I think sometimes people take their eye off the human aspect of it. And I saw a post on I think it was Instagram, something recently where you shared the James Clear book, and
Yes.
it's just how that was the how you felt that was some of the best advice for PTs and personal trainers. But yeah, I'm aware Yusuf asked a question, and I'm pushing you onto a different question. But I just
No, it's good.
felt like a natural.
You tangented with me. I still know where I'm
All
going.
right, still there.
So yeah, and so the segue is basically like, you have to create these systems to handle your eventual success as an online coach,
Yeah.
and know what your limits are, and then eventually you go, either I'm happy doing this. Like, don't get me wrong, just like in-person personal training, like I knew some guys back when I lived in Sacramento who were in their 40s and had been training in like 3 different box gyms with a full client load for 15 years and loved it and were great. Absolutely awesome. They have like 85 different certifications after their name because they've been doing their CEUs for 2 decades. And, they got their NSCA CPT back when the NSCA was like 5 fat weightlifters who were studying exercise physiology and meeting in a single room at a hotel room for their national conference. And now it's, huge and battling at CrossFit. But anyway, so like, you need to have that, and you may decide that's perfect for me. This is what I want to do. I'm a coach. I love it. I got my systems, and I'm solid. And like, for example, Berto, Brad, and Jeff, they're full-time online coaches, and that's 100% fine. And they may or may not always want to do that. But I think if, for example, I've had an academic career just as much as I've had an athlete career, just as much as I've had a coaching career. So there's all these things I want to do, and like I said, I felt that I could provide the most utility, reaching a larger audience with content, writing books, doing mass, appearing on YouTube, doing podcasts like this. Thank you, guys. And so slowly steering that ship was great. And then I think, just like I was super excited when I first started online coaching, and I didn't think about the systems I would need to handle success, same kind of thing, and I'm really, really grateful that I didn't just write the books on my own, that I had, Andy Morgan and Andrea who had some sense of that. And we set up the system and the team that could handle where those went, because I didn't foresee getting contacted by publishing companies in foreign countries who want to translate it. Just like I didn't foresee, getting asked by Greg Nuckols in the tail end of my PhD and being like, hey, you want to do a research review? And if it wasn't for folks like Andy and Lindsay Nuckols, who is the brains behind mass in terms of the structural orientation and distribution and all that, I would be screwed and I wouldn't be able to do all of this. And some of the things where I've set up systems as well on my own, like you said, with the floodgates of Yusuf, of me being larger. Like, I remember I didn't even get on Instagram, just to show you how initially bad I am at this stuff. I'm trying to be a science communicator in fitness, especially bodybuilding. You'd think a visual medium would be helpful, right? I didn't get on Instagram until mid-2016. And that was basically from, I did a series of seminars in Australia with Lauren Conlon, Paul Reveille, and Lee Norton. And at every single place we went, there were a fair number of people who hadn't heard of me. Probably because I wasn't on Instagram. And each one of them like, so what's your Instagram? I'll follow you. And I'd be like, I'm on Facebook. And they look at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I think after I'd had, half the population of Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth make fun of me, I was like, fine. I'll do it when I get back. Yeah. And so that was 2016. Now I have nearly 120,000 followers, and it's a completely different ball game when you have that. So I have the vast majority of people I follow muted. And I just check out. It's like basically the feed is an entertainment tool. And if you are using social media as a part of your business, you eventually have to say goodbye or create a separate private account or whatever to using social media in that way, or it becomes this counterproductive barrier. You get on Instagram to make a post, you start scrolling through your feed, you look up, and it's 20 minutes later. And honestly, even people who don't have a business sometimes are more hurt by than helped by their feed. Like, how many times do you ask someone, like, are you following that person? Does following this person actually make you happy, or do you just hate yourself after a while? And I've actually been part of research showing that people really like sometimes are just Instagram, and you have to really moderate your own behavior. So, like, for example, Facebook, I've used every trick in the book to make my feed non-existent, or just highlight a couple key certain things that I want to follow. I pretty much only respond when I get tagged. All the kinds of notifications are off. On Instagram, pretty much everyone is muted. No offense to anyone listening to this. It's just so that I can get in there and have utility and do my job, and then I'll check on people if I want. And I don't touch my message requests for either Facebook or Instagram. And I figure, if someone really needs to get in touch with me at this stage, that's why I have the email to the 3DMJ office on my thing, if it's something like that. And so I post once on Instagram at peak hours for my audience. Make sure it's a post of utility on a daily basis. And if there's really something I can't figure out that has any utility on a daily basis, I just skip a day. So I'm not going to sit here and put out nonsense just to put out nonsense. And I very much only am on social media for that little block in the morning for basically 2 to 3 hours, unless I'm asked a direct question or it's someone I know, et cetera, et cetera. So I've definitely got this system. And some other things that I do is I completely ignore YouTube comments. I've been going to YouTube Comments Anonymous.
YouTube is the dregs of comments, though. Like, it's how like each social media has its own kind of flavor, its own like archetype of character. Facebook is 45-year-old woman, anti-vaxxer, believes that modern medicine is a scam and believes in natural healing and CBD oil to cure lymphoma and all diseases. Twitter is like the uber woke, polarizing, like flexing and photos of Lamborghinis and showing how much, like screenshots of their Stripe account, with like really bro sciencey kind of fitness advice. And YouTube comments are just like the kind of nuclear wasteland of
gym cells. Yeah.
Gym cells.
I always felt that YouTube was all right comment wise, but I mean we get some.
Depends on which corner.
Yeah, I mean, like if you find a good channel, it can be like honestly, like the 3DMJ channel has a very different feel than a lot of the rest of YouTube fitness, and it's definitely changing. Like I mean, these platforms are not a monolith. Like it is shocking to me that Jeff Nippert has well over 1 million subscribers now doing science-based reviews. I think that's awesome. Yeah. Omar Isuf has been around for 10 years and partnered with him because he's always put out really good information. So there's definitely exceptions, but there are these memes and it's even like you have to think about the negativity bias. Like there's some research that would suggest like positive comments just kind of flow by you like the wind, and it takes like 20 times the number of positive things to have the same impact on you as one negative thing. So even though 99% plus of the interactions I have are constructive, not even necessarily positive, but constructive, not vitriolic or attacking or emotionally harmful to me. The 1% is enough to really cause issues, especially when you're with like 1% of a huge number of followers is a lot. So as it scales, it's not like I have 100 times my followers of mental capacity now. Like I'm still the same person. So
I'm actually still surprised that you get 1% of that you get haters just because you're not a very like polarizing. Like I feel
I'm
like
quite boring. I agree. Like
I'm trying to think how do I put this.
They're better targets.
But yeah,
it is very rare though. Is what I'm getting at. But rare is scales relatively, right? And I don't know if it's 1%, but it's a small amount. But I know that it affects me. So, and different platforms have a different feel. Like on Facebook, those moments like force you to engage. It's someone who wants to debate you over something, and in a way that maybe like not respecting your time, expecting you to do it immediately, misrepresenting you, tagging you multiple times, all this stuff. And it's like I don't want to spend all my time doing this. If someone has a genuine comment and tags me and we can have a respectful discussion, I'm down at whatever pace I can participate. But that's why I don't spend all my time on Facebook, because it can just completely suck me in and then a day's gone.
It's like if you want to eat 300 grams of protein, like that's fine. Like you can do that. I'm not going to argue with you about provide references. You're like, well, that's okay. You can do what you do.
Yeah. So Facebook I don't spend much time on at all. I just pretty much use it to interact with the mass groups and a few other places where like I do a Facebook Live or an AMA or something like that. But and then like you said, I'm not even on Twitter, and I just don't think it's a very useful platform. And there's a ton of scientists on Twitter, and they're basically just arguing with each other. Like they don't even actually reach people who would like to hear about applied science. And Instagram is great because the comments just don't steamroll, and because you can't tag people, you can't put links. It's a double-edged sword. It definitely limits the quality of the comment, but man, it's just overwhelmingly not negative relative to other platforms. YouTube comments, like you said, are just a general cesspool. Most of the time, that's where most of the trolls are. And the way I see it is like I put out so much content, both long and short form, that most of the time it's just a matter of if the person messages me, it's helping them find what they need to. Here's the podcast episode. Here's a YouTube video. Where really, like, you're asking such an in-depth question that I can never answer it in an Instagram message to you. Here's my books. You don't have to buy them, but that's really the only place. If you want to know everything my brain knows about periodization, that's chapter 3. Like, you can read it, but I can't really help you in this scenario. Or this is so individualized, I'm just going to send you to the 3DMJ coaches. So that ends up being my interactions now that I produce so much content. And I feel like, every Monday you can hear me talk way more in depth than anyone ever should about lifting, and this happens multiple times per week. So I find that there's a trade-off, right? So if you spend all your time as a science communicator answering individuals' questions, then that is time you can't do something else. Every yes is a no to everything else that is not that at that moment. And I think that is something I've had to realize. So then it comes down to really, how do I provide the most utility? So it's not that I don't answer any questions at all. It's that I know there's some people listening to this who've asked me questions, have been annoyed. When people ask me questions, I'm very Socratic. I make sure that they understand what they're asking, and I challenge them to think rationally and logically. And I'll kind of act like Mr. Miyagi. I'll be like, oh, you got this question, we'll read this, and then let me know what you think when you come back. And I think a lot of people they're frustrated, but I'm not the bodybuilding Google. Like, I'm actually, my purpose is to try to get people to understand rational skepticism and apply it to fitness. Because look, if you're going to be involved with fitness for more than a year, you're going to have to invest just a little more. You don't need to be getting a PhD, but you need to get to the point where you can deal with the barriers that come your way, and the standard approach is putting your head down and go through it. Intensity is everything, optimize everything, like just is only going to get you so far until you're hurt. So like, I don't want to do a disservice and be a crutch to people. I'll answer questions when they show that they've really thought about it and they've hit a dead end, and I want to help them. But most of the time it's here's where I discuss that, where you need to understand this and this first, or is that even a relevant question? Ask yourself why you're asking this. Is this fear-based? Are you looking to me for reassurance? I'm not your safety blanket, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things. So it's hard conversations with myself of how can I provide the most value? How can I help the most people? What can I do within my purview, with my time and with my emotional state to provide the most utility? And that's kind of the lens I put everything through. So that's kind of why you see me doing what I do, and how I've justify to myself that it's okay to not answer every single question I get sent online, or to not enter my requests and just answer the messages in my email or my primary messages.
I think most people, like the average person, has never done a Facebook Live video, has never done a video podcast interview, might post the odd sort of family photo on Instagram, that sort of thing. The idea of, you move from that world into trying to market yourself or gain a following. There's always, as you say, there's always a percentage of people who say nasty things. And I don't, maybe you much of it, but certainly we've experienced, and I know a lot of other people who've experienced, like the slightly darker side of the negative comments, where people get like nasty and say personal things. And obviously, if you were to interact with a room or 100,000 people in any context, not that you'd ever really be able to do that, but you know what I mean. Like there's gonna be one person in there who you probably don't want to spend much time with. Like, how do you have any advice, or for someone who goes from never experiencing that before to suddenly they do a video on Facebook and someone says something nasty about them or personal about them? I imagine you've had a lot of experience with that. Any coping tips, or how you sort of mentally deal with that?
Yes, and it has happened, but I think some of the ways that I respond and I interact with it has kept it as possibly as minimal as it can be. And I feel almost arrogant saying that, but I know all the other people in my community, or the vast majority of them. Like, I know all the other people who kind of do what I do, and I seem to get far less than most. Not everyone. There are some people who are just on point in this in their own way. But I notice what's done differently is that I try to approach the internet in a fundamentally different way than I approach in person. So you guys have seen me interact online, but you've also hung out with me in times I've come to London, right? Mm-hmm. And you guys know that I am happy to take the piss. I make a lot of things I think are hilarious, really. I don't know about other people. I say some ridiculous shit. But because you can see me, you can hear my inflection, I'm reacting to you, I've got a feel for what types of jokes you're cool with and what not, what kind of level of banter are you comfortable with. I don't want to like poke you in some place that is that's actually painful, like it's a sore spot. I can say things with that level of context and inflection and interaction that's much more free. And you'll notice when I'm online, I am much more sanitized. It's not that I'm not funny. It's just that I'm not going to make an off-color joke or something that might not be understood as sarcastic or speak in that way, because so much of those things that you can have in person are gone. And people do the exact opposite. People they're super nice and reserved and very introverted in person, and then when they get online, they're like, fuck it, it's just the internet, Mm-hmm. And that's the exact opposite way you should behave if you want to minimize your stress, because people can't tell. It's like me having a private conversation with someone. That's how people think they're interacting when someone like tags you on Facebook and says, hey, what do you think about this? And you respond to them, and we're trained like, oh, okay, this is Tom calling me on the phone and he's asking me a question. But it's not. It's everyone who can see that, listening to your conversation and feeling that they have the right to step in, or the obligation to, because you're saying it publicly, to step in and go, hold on, here's what I think.
That's really interesting, because I guess you lose the nuance of the 3D in-person interaction, and then also the cultural, like certain English-speaking cultures are not as au fait with sarcastic jokes as others, and I guess compounding that, you have some people that are, it's kind of, I guess, this new wave over the last 5 years of people that are like looking for something to be offended by, because it's almost like a sense of gratification from doing that. Like, we got Menno Henselmans in trouble recently, with a podcast, because we asked him about alcohol, and he was like, well, actually, GHB is a perfect alternative to alcohol because it improves growth hormone output, it's much more conducive to muscle protein synthesis, but the problem is it's become classified as a drug because it's used in date rape, and so all of these people going around date raping everyone, they are ruining our gains. And so we put that at the start of the podcast, and we got a tweet of someone being like, I can't believe these guys are joking about date rape. That's absolutely disgusting. It's like, we're not joking about date rape. Like, that's obviously not the. But
we had a similar thing with. We had Andy Morgan on the podcast. This is a few years ago, and he said on the podcast that he does not work with women, and posted that podcast, and the messages we were getting from about that, of women being offended, and you just don't know what do you say? How do you, I'm not Andy. It's not my opinion. It's just, we thought it was a nice podcast, but clearly
and also not. If you're a private, if you're a private service provider, you can choose what niche you work with. Yeah. It's not, you are being discriminatory, but that's just because you specialize in it. You can say, I'm a gynecologist. I don't work with things outside of my specialty.
Andy purely does that. I mean, it's exactly. Things can be taken out of context. Andy does that because he doesn't feel comfortable. He couldn't provide a good service to women, and that might say something about him, but it's not. It's him purposely trying to provide good service to who he works with, not going, I don't work with women because they're the inferior sex. It's not the same thing. His
explanation on the podcast is logically very solid. He's not, but people hear the first sentence and then right, that's it. I'm taken to the internet with my pitchfork to start a fight. So it's I think it is, and it feels certainly kind of I guess people who maybe operate on social media as like that's where my family photos are and that sort of thing. Maybe don't see it, but it definitely feels like it's getting more the way of people looking for things to argue about and looking to pick a fight, especially on certain platforms.
Well, social media rewards volume, not necessarily an equal representation of opinions, you know?
Yeah.
And very, very loud, vocal, opinionated minorities, minority opinions are what typically are seen, and it colors our view because of that negativity bias, and it can feel like a very uncomfortable place to be, and that's often unfortunate because you're probably having a positive impact on 95% of people, and it's a small section of people who have a skewed perception of things, and not that their view isn't valid necessarily, but the way it feels as the person on the receiving side of it is, oh my God, I can't say anything, or I've got to be so careful, or maybe I just shouldn't even be on here. Like maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I think it creates a lot of insecurity and prevents a lot of potentially good content coming out. So what I do is I'm extremely careful to make sure that I provide context, that I make disclaimers, that I give information in a way that I'm doing everything I can in my power to make sure it's received in a certain way. I think a big mistake a lot of people do is they basically go, look, that's not what I meant. And if you receive it the wrong way, it's your fault. And it's like, well, that's not really the way communication works. So I try to do everything I can on my end. And then when I interact with someone, I do everything in my power to try to operate from a place of trying to get to the truth and having it not be about me. So the ego is the enemy kind of mentality. So when I get challenged, I try to go, all right, I'm here to find the truth. And if the person keeps responding in a way that seems to be like they're competing with me or they're attacking me, I will normally just directly speak to that. I'm like, hey, it sounds like you want to win this argument, or to you this is a debate and the purpose is to win. Like if that's what you want to do, feel free to do it, but I don't really want to participate in it. Here's the information, here's the data, here's how I interpret it. I respect your interpretation, and it's okay if it's different, and let's just leave it at that. And people don't normally know what to do with that. If they're truly just out there to try to get a response from you, they troll you, it requires something back from you, and not that. So when you do that, it fizzles out very quickly. I think I have gotten very, very comfortable with admitting when I'm wrong, or when I don't know. I think the archetype we came from in the fitness industry is kind of like no disrespect to the dead, but like the Poliquin, who is, I'm the smartest guy in the room, no matter what room it is, and I have an answer for everything, even if I just made it up. And I bought into my hype so much for the last 10 years that, if you ask me a question I don't know, I'm just going to speculate, and that is equivalent to scientific evidence because I'm the guru, And you'll even see some people get worse information over time as they buy into their own hype more and more and more. You see Charles Poliquin going from being the guy who first published anything about daily undulating periodization to you need to take 1 gram of fish oil per percentage body fat because I don't know, or I'm going to pinch the skin fold and that's going to tell me that you have an endocrinological disorder. So and that's a common theme. You can see that in a lot of the guys from the 90s. And so I think seeing that and going, I never want to be that, has helped me to stay, I try to steel man people instead of straw man them. I try to operate from a principle of charity. When I get asked a question, I'll repeat back to them and make sure I understand what they're saying. And then if we reach an impasse, that's fine. It just doesn't matter. It's not about me. So, and if someone does just directly attack me or just talk shit to me, it's purely just something hateful or primarily with some minor disagreement, I become extremely liberal with just bam, why? This is helping no one. So I think those combination of things has been really helpful for my sanity and my ability to spend more time putting out good content instead of interacting with things that are not helpful. And with just the advice of, look, obviously we want a flexible diet and a good relationship with food, but if almond butter turns into 1 tablespoon becoming the whole jar, just don't have it in the house. That's what I've done, abstinence with YouTube comments. Like every time I try to go back to YouTube comments, I get sucked in, and then it ruins my life for like 72 hours or whatever.
That's
So
your
I
house
just
better.
I'm just not there. Yeah, exactly. Like YouTube comments, the frequency or the vitriolic nature or just the pure trolling, the threshold's just a little above all of my coping strategies. So I'm just not there. So it's like, I'm gonna put this YouTube video out into the ether. If you have a question about it, you can ask me on Instagram. Like,
If you never see it, like it essentially never exists, does it? So nothing's ever going to happen. So it's fine.
Where were we at?
absolutely ostrich it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The James Clear thing. I'm aware that Johnny segued my segue, and then I ended up
then
segueing
you
his
segued
segue
mine.
of the segue.
It was so we both read Atomic Habits.
Great.
Really like it, yeah. Really, really like it. And just some of the stuff what I took from your post, and I think what we took from working with you and sort of using that as the foundation for how to coach people online, because there isn't really, or especially back then, you couldn't really go to someone and learn that, right? It was it was like an evolving thing, and I think it's quite difficult to communicate with someone who's often telling you, they're sharing intimate photos in a legal way. They're telling things about their personal life or their emotions that are quite close to them, and you have to guide them through this journey. It can be quite difficult to learn how to do that. And I think some of the stuff that you pick up in sort of learning how to be a coach is that actually the things that you maybe think matter, like the extra nutrition certifications or the kettlebell level 40 or whatever it is, like you think that's the answer, but actually it's kind of your ways of dealing with behavior, your ways of helping someone improve their behavior and modify their behavior slightly over time. And I think, your point about like the Atomic Habits as being a great resource for a PT is probably something that people don't ever think about. Like it's pushed to one side because I've got to learn sales and marketing, I've got to learn YouTube and Facebook and social media and extra nutrition certification. So is that, I guess, if you could give some advice to someone who's maybe just starting out as an online coach of a skill that you feel is like the core skill or a way to start developing, is that way, would you begin there rather than qualifications, or do you think one's required? And
I almost think it's needing a paradigm shift on the way you view the coaching relationship, and then you will automatically start to value things differently and see the importance of that. I think if you see online coaching as primarily I write programs and nutrition and tell people what to do, then you'll make sure you're good enough at Excel. You'll stay up to date with the science, and then you'll get comfortable adjusting macros and adjusting volume and intensity. Not that those things don't have value, and these are also people like, oh shit, I don't want anyone to steal my Excel spreadsheet, because and it just shows you where their values are. Like this is me. I am my systems. I am my program. I am this, and these are my secret sauce. I got to keep it. And again, those things have value. Don't get me wrong; they're important. But if that's what you see as you're doing, that kind of has this inherent idea. This is a top-down coaching approach, right? You come to me. You come to an expert, meaning you don't know what you're doing, and you want me to fix you. And I think people put that out there as well. Like, here's how I help Tammy change her transform over 12 weeks. I'll put out this 12-week transformation. Or here's how many pro cards I got in the 2019 season. Or here's how many competitors we had at nationals or worlds. Or here's how many medals my athletes won this year. You're selling yourself like a product, right? And you'll hear people who go coach shopping. Like, oh, they come to you and they've worked with 5 other people, right? Which is already a huge red flag. But it's not just that person's a problem client, quote unquote. It's that coaches are marketing themselves as supplements. They're saying, come to me for a 12-week transformation. I'm the best. So they're like, I'm just going to try the coach until I have the instant results. Instead of saying, I'm here to help you achieve your goals. I'm the person who can collaborate with you, develop a relationship, and then give you the tools you need to succeed and be the person with the hand on your shoulder behind your back to support you when things aren't going well, and we can go back to the drawing board and figure it out. So I think if you understand that the role of a coach, that it is a client-centered, bottom-up approach, and that you are there in a support role. You're not the captain, you're the navigator. Now this captain may be their first commission. Maybe their goal is to try to get through the ice passages over the North Pole, right? They've never done it before. And you're a seasoned navigator who's done that 14 times. You're going to, it's not like you're just going to be like, yes, sir, whatever you want to do. You're going to be like, I think this ice bridge will be closed. It was this time last year. We shouldn't take this course. Maybe we should bring some lime juice so we don't get scurvy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like this 21-year-old captain has never been there before. You have. You're the best resource, but they're still the captain.
It's so interesting.
It's their boat.
It's
their commission. It's their goal, and you're to support that. And I think if you have that understanding, then you can be like, oh, the client has the answers to all their own problems. They're my primary source of information. My primary source of information is not in my NSCA handbook. Like this isn't where I'm going to get the answers to fix my client. This is, my toolbox, but I need to assess them first and be like, hey, what do you need? And I need to get out, okay, what's going on with you nutritionally? Where are you at emotionally? What is your social dynamic with your family? All the things that are the potential barriers, they come from them, and the solutions also come from them. But I think a lot of coaches, they come from that kind of like that guru mentality, and it's like, I have all the answers. You just need to do what I say. And if you get one little tiny thing wrong about my program, it's on you.
Mm.
It's so interesting.
Oh, you're 10 grams over on your carbs on Wednesday. That's why you failed the plan. So I think it was
your fault.
Shift.
But if you win, then it's all me. It was all, and it's so interesting, like, to see coaches as supplements, and I guess like that is the Kool-Aid that the guru coaches have been making, but the clients are drinking it as well. And we'll often have fitness clients that will say like, oh my god, thanks so much, like you've completely transformed me. And it's like, well, no, like you've done the work. Yes. Like you're the one that's gone to we've not lifted the weights for you. We've just said go and lift these weights for this amount of times, and
in this way.
But you've done the work. But it's like they've internalized this idea, this transactional dynamic so much that they are prone to believing that it was the external world that's done it. And the coaches don't help that, especially when you said that they throw logic and empiricism out of the window and say, well, this is the answer because that's my speculation and it's golden, it's bulletproof.
Or when it's like, I've got all these things going on in my personal life and I'm incredibly stressed and I've got all this stuff on with work, but, drop 10 grams carbs because it's like, I think people see it as, I understand flexible dieting. I know that it's IFYM, and I know that I'm going to drop someone's carbs over 12 weeks. Rather than, I have access to all this information that I've learned. This is a person going through a complex thing, emotionally. Even dieting by itself is incredibly emotionally complex. How do I meet that person where they're at and give them the advice that they need? I think that's probably the hardest thing I've always found as a coach, is like trying to think like what is it that could help this person the best, rather than just like square peg round hole, like genetic periodization. No matter what you say,
Yep. And there's some additional barriers online. Like people always focus on the scalability of online coaching, removing the commute, reducing the expenses of travel, not having to share profits with a gym owner while you're a contractor there. All these things, and you're getting inherently more motivated clients because they're approaching you and they're training on your own. They highlight all the pros, but one of the things that I found tremendously much easier when I was an in-person personal trainer is that those first 10 minutes when someone walks in the door and you're checking in with them on Monday about how the weekend went and what's going on with them, all of those really personal elements become super apparent. And I found for me it was much more obvious that I can't just tell them work harder, I did that for a while, but it was so obviously not working. And it would just require such a level of cognitive dissonance and blaming to maintain the idea that I actually knew what the hell I was doing. So I very quickly had to figure out, like, all right, I can't just train everyone like they're Eric Helms who has the goals of being a bodybuilder. Like,
this is a client feel as well when they're just told, like, just not working hard enough.
Suck it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's knowing the energy balance or knowing that you have to exercise more has not cured the obesity epidemic. If that's all you have to offer a client, you're a shitty ass trainer, right? So very quickly, I hit that wall, and I had to figure out what that meant, and I had to start learning about motivational interviewing and asking more questions and shutting up and getting outside of my own experience to try to help people improve their own, and listening and putting myself in their shoes per se. That is so much harder as an online client, because and there's things you can do to improve it. But man, when it first started, you're just getting an email, and they're even more so sanitizing what you can get. They're typing things out. You don't know what they deleted 3 times before they sent it. You don't know at all what's on their face, or any inflection. They don't know what to share with you. So then you can improve that by sending them videos, getting videos back, doing Skype calls every once in a while. But you're getting this tiny little snapshot that's curated by them in an even more intentional way than when you're in person. Because even when we're talking, we show people what we want of ourselves. So establishing the trust and establishing the structure and establishing the relationship that allows you to get at all those keys that are locked away inside of them is so much harder online. And you have to really set up systems to do that. And like you said, the clients have drank the Kool-Aid, right? So if you're a product and you're magic and it's your macro combination and your training program that matters, then why would I even tell you any of this shit? I've had clients tell me this probably isn't relevant, but I just got divorced. And I'm like, of course that's fucking relevant. That's a bomb went off in your life. You don't think it's going to affect the rest of your life, So, and I've had clients apologize. I know I shouldn't be telling about my personal life. And that's a huge red flag for me. That turns into, I just wanted to kind of share off the top of my head that this is going on in my personal life, to me then telling them 30 minutes what our relationship should be, It's the kind of thing that is just totally different when you're online versus in person, and you have to really set up systems and a philosophy behind it to ensure that you can capture all that information.
Because I think you were the first coach either of us had ever worked with. I hired you, and then Yusuf got really jealous, so then Yusuf had to hire you, and then that's how it worked. But I can remember initially you send an email that's a couple of lines long or whatever, and when you're then on the recipient end of that as a coach, and someone's like, all fine this week, no changes, you read it and you're like, is everything actually all right? And then I can remember apologizing for, you progressively share more and more with someone as you work with them longer. I can remember apologizing for sharing things that I was like, should I have really said that? But I know you definitely helped both of us through really. I'm just turning orange. I'm just going to turn Flux off, and there's my sleep ruined. I can remember you helping us through some really personal, difficult periods of our life, and you come out the back of that process, and you're like, I can't believe that someone who at that time I'd never met before, who I initially hired to help me, because I felt like I had stubborn fat and I thought it was the amount of carbs I was eating, and all these sorts of things. And then you end up with this relationship online with someone. I think that was what led us to push Propane more, because you realize how much of an impact you can potentially have. But I completely agree with you that accessing that, if someone isn't willing to share, I think some people see it as, this person is outside my social circle, they don't know anyone that I know, I can tell them something, and unless they go and broadcast on the internet, it's never going to come back to me. Some people see it like that, and some people see it as I'm not sharing this with this random weirdo. But if you can access that from someone, the ability you have to potentially objectively guide someone through difficult things is pretty cool. So
it's huge. I remember sitting on the morning of my dad dying, listening to a 15-minute video that you recorded, Eric. And it was completely off training, but it was exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And to think the guy who I hired to get me a bit leaner so I can see my pancreas in good lighting is talking to me about this issue at this time. Is and that only happens, as you said, from the building up the trust, and not seeing a coach as a supplement, as a tool to get you from this point to this point, but actually a facilitator for you to grow.
Yeah. And I think that it takes some, Well, awesome. That's just I don't want to not acknowledge that. Like, that's really cool to hear. Thank you. I'm not great at hearing that kind of stuff. So I just did. I heard it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Awesome.
Noted. Thank you.
So I think a really important way to ensure that you start off on the right foot is, so I want to say this existed around the time or maybe right after I worked with you guys, but we have like a little like PDF we send to clients that has like about the coaching relationship, and it kind of, a lot of the themes we talked about and what like a good adult communication looks like is in there. So I think it's one thing just to like, if you listen to this podcast and you're like, that's a really good point, that's how I want to operate, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to switch to videos. I'm going to do more asking. I'm going to make sure that I'm there setting the goals, all that stuff. That's all fine and good, but you're still getting people who are coming to you who kind of have that 12-week transformation mindset. So you need to do a lot of things, both initially and along the way, to try to help them turn that leaf, or they won't be able to help themselves, and you won't be able to help them help themselves to the same degree. So, for example, sit down and write out what your mission statement is, what your values are, what you believe as a coach, what you want a coaching relationship to be with the client, and have it be something that they read and sign. You know, like, we have a lot of shit we send to clients now. Like, we have a 3DMJ like value code. Like, we have code of ethics, especially for our competitors. You know, like, to let them know, like, hey, we're serious about our athletes, you know, following the rules in the organization. And, you know, if you're going to be a 3DMJ athlete, you're going to be representing us. So for us to work with you, this is a two-way street. We're not just someone you hired. You know, if you're going to represent 3DMJ, we want you to be an honorable competitor. We want you to win and lose gracefully, and all these little things. And then like the PDF we have on good communication and what information we need and how to respond to us. Basically, we title it "How to Get the Most Out of Your Coaching," because that's really relevant to the person, and that's why it's important on your end, and when it really kind of the rubber hits the road. So you can do these things without overloading them all with like the 10-page email initially and 14 PDFs. But you give them kind of core message and mission, and then over time, like any relationship, you build that trust, and you teach them what you need, and they teach you what they need from you, and that's the way it should be. Like, coaching should be the kind of thing that gets better, and if it's not, then that maybe not isn't a good fit, or at least it's worth a conversation. Because I know a lot of people, it's almost the exact opposite. Like, yeah, like, it should immediately be great, and then if it's not, I'm switching to the next person because the supplement didn't work. And in reality, it's almost like, you know, a supplement that doesn't work at first, and then it figures you out and then starts to work. Not that great. Yeah, it's a bad analogy. It just aren't supplements, but
it's like,
you know what I'm saying.
You got to read the
saturation, right? It's like nano creatine is what I'm saying. Yeah.
You got to caress the creatine. You got to take it out for dinner. You got to, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ear responses, man. The creatine works so much better if you record creatine videos.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I found actually
that's how you really unlock that creatine. Yeah.
So, Eric, unless Johnny has any other questions for you.
I do have one more, but it's like the closing question.
Okay.
So yeah, what were you about to say?
Well, I've got 4 very specific questions that the audience is bursting to ask.
This is the definition, Eric, of a segue. What you're about to experience here.
I'm down. Put me on that scooter.
Go ahead, Johnny.
No, you go.
Oh, okay.
You go. Then I'll ask the final question.
Fine. So Eric, would you rather every time you go into a room, you have to lick the nearest window, not allowed to explain yourself, or every time you sneeze, you poo yourself a little bit?
Lick a window.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that because of
Yusuf's worried about the hygiene of the window?
The immunological benefits, you're introducing a small amount of bacteremia every day. Eventually you become this like superhuman, resistant to all windows.
Absolutely. I see it as, you know, like, I'm just making my immune system stronger, or I have to buy underwear every day. That's crazy.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, true.
Unless I just take... Actually, hold on. You said only when I sneeze. So what if I'm just on a daily dose of antihistamines? Maybe Fine. I chose it wrong. But anyway, yeah.
And also there's nothing stopping from licking windows now when you don't lick windows. So you obviously don't think it's that great. Otherwise you'd already be doing it.
Correct. Yeah, I don't truly think this is the way to never get like any communicable disease. So.
Fair enough. You forgive me.
Well, I am a doctor, and that's based on my opinion. That's
That must be right.
yeah. I mean,
If you prescribed me to lick windows, I would do it because you're a doctor.
I've got no evidence for it, but it's just my conjecture,
Well, we have to
and I'm a
trust
guru
it.
with
That's the rule. You have to trust it.
fine.
I'll lick that window.
So, would you rather? This is from a reader. Would you rather have to eat McDonald's all the time for all your meals, or never train again?
Eat McDonald's. Easy.
I think that would be
Never
fine.
training again. I'd go crazy. I could make it work with McDonald's, but I couldn't make it not training.
I suppose they've got a decent enough range, haven't they? It's just a shame that none of it's very good.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a lose-lose, but the McDonald's is a livable loss.
Fair enough.
I think McDonald's is really nice.
Really, I think KFC is the winner, followed by Subway, followed maybe Taco Bell or something, and then
I think in the US, I imagine the range is the best. I think that's probably the peak. If you're going to have fast food, that's the place to be. I imagine, Eric, you know better than I do.
I'm in New Zealand, so it's you're right, but it doesn't benefit me.
Well, I suppose
I
what
would
you
have
do,
a subpar
if you're in New
McDonald's.
Zealand, just pop over to Indonesia, Thailand, where you can just get chicken curry with rice in
Breakfast.
McDonald's.
3 meals a day, pop up to Indonesia.
Yeah, and you get some more variety.
No big deal. I mean, I would just be flying. Yeah, I guess I could do intermittent fasting, one meal. I probably just would stay in New Zealand. So, the more I think about this.
Staying in New Zealand looking
Global
window.
question. So, final two. Would you rather have sex with a goat but no one knew, or everyone thinks you did but you didn't actually? I think these last two are actually really indicative of your fundamental principles.
So, is the goat consenting?
Goat's consented.
Okay, well, if it's a consenting goat, that's a little different.
That's quite a deep philosophical question. Is the goat consenting?
Is it?
Yeah, how do I know?
Well,
The goat can't really give consent.
Yeah. How would
Since
we
the
get
goat can't give consent,
It would
I'm
have to
going to
make
have
the
to
first
go
move, wouldn't it?
It actually would. I would have to. The goat would have to try to sleep with me.
So you'd have to seduce the goat. Or
No.
everyone thinks
But
you.
I mean, I don't know if the goat's sober. That seduction might not be equivalent of consent.
True.
And also, I got to think about my wife. Like even if the goat gives consent, I don't want to necessarily.
But your wife would think
so
that you did, regardless. Well, if you didn't.
You mentioned at the start of the podcast, Eric, though, that everyone encounters these times where you get a big pop of exposure, lots of attention, lots of traffic. If everybody thinks you've done that, I guarantee you would gain more exposure than you have now.
I'd have new opportunities. If there was goat-related opportunities, I'd probably have that. I would probably go with everyone thinks I had slept with the goat, but I did not actually.
Well, you as Johnny said, you'd gain Instagram followers. You could do #goat.
It's a win-win, really.
Yeah.
I
I would be the greatest of all
What do you
time.
think about it?
So.
There's a story I've heard about Jeff Bezos. I don't know how true this is. I think Yusuf probably knows the story, but someone apparently got a hold of some very intimate photos of him, threatened to
He
release
was
them.
like a Saudi prince.
Was it?
So I imagine because of that, he must have hired someone very expensive to
acquire them, yeah. But Jeff just went, release them. I'm not being blackmailed. And I think
Nice.
that's such a great way to, everyone can think that about me. I don't mind.
Well, it devalues your ransom as well, doesn't it? Suddenly,
Yeah, got
nothing
nothing.
on you.
Nothing.
Final one, Eric. Would you rather have a incurable body odor, but people always tell you that you stink, or they never tell you?
So they can tell me, but I can't do anything about it. Or
Yeah. It's like YouTube.
that's a tough one because the lack of agency is kind of doesn't really matter either way. That's a tough one.
It's the same as not looking at YouTube comments.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same because you've got the incurable smell regardless, and the only difference really is people telling you every day a negative comment, or
True.
or just
I guess if you frame it that way, then I guess not being told. So
I think me too.
everyone seems to just hate me. It's okay. I would just stop traveling to conferences and just do things on YouTube. It'd be fine.
Oh yeah, solved.
Solution.
Yeah.
I like your can-do attitude to these. Would you rather?
The people in so Greg Knuckles, you, Menno, I think they're probably the best. They take these questions and they really sit and think about it, and I think that's how you really extract the humour from them.
It was the flip the coin with Menno. Like, would you flip a coin? If it's heads, you get $100 million. If it's tails, you die instantly. He was like,
actually, hold on.
Flips a coin.
I was going to say, see what Eric says.
Well, he might not agree with Menno, but...
So flip a coin, 50-50 chance that I'll die or get $100 million?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't flip the coin.
You wouldn't?
What would I do with $100 million?
Well...
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's a different way of viewing it. Menno was just immediately... like neutral utility from dying.
The expected value is $50 million.
Yeah, but I mean that has to actually have meaning or value in my life. Like, I'm not like honestly, if someone was like, would you rather have $1 billion or $1 million? I'd kind of be like, they're basically the same for my purposes. Like, what am I going to do? You know,
I think $1 billion would potentially completely ruin your life. I think it has that potential. Yeah.
So I mean, honestly, like, I'll get even more scientific with you. Like, if you look at data, once you pass a certain level of the poverty line, your happiness is the same. You know, I just don't want to have to worry about
income, isn't it, than like absolute income, from what I've seen.
So there's some of that, but a huge component of it is just basic needs. Like, once you have your basic needs met, and you know, like, you're not worrying about like needing to get food every day or feed your kids or pay the bills or things like that, you're fine. You know, so there is some element of relative, but there's also the absolute. What do you need to get the resources in your area and whatever your geographical location is? And once you've satisfied that, so what? You know, like, so. Whether I have $1 billion or $1 million, it just means I have more in savings at this stage. You know, like,
I think people get happiness from it's like suddenly getting a 400 kilo deadlift because of a steroid cycle. Like, that feels nowhere near the same as progressively over decades hitting a 400 kilo deadlift.
And Johnny knows he's done both. So,
well, not 400, Eric. Not yet.
Or the steroid.
In fact, he's done neither.
Yeah, I think the last time we spoke to you, Eric, there was a subtle steroid accusation. Don't know whether you remember.
It's because of the shape of his face, isn't it?
I think you said at 3DMJ, you know, we only work with natural. I can't remember the phrasing, and you said just took that as Eric's just accused me of taking drugs.
Yep, that's right.
So obviously we stopped working with you, Johnny.
Yeah, I know.
So we had to stop working with Mr. Moonface, Big Squatter. So,
Savage.
So, final question. You haven't asked me how long my legs are, which is the most common question I get on the internet.
Yeah.
Why?
By the way, it is a secondary effect of certain types of steroids. That's no effect. Tibia growth.
Does it also shrink your torso relative to your?
Correct. It actually takes ribs and incorporates them into your femur.
Bolts them on.
Yeah, exactly.
Great sumo deadlift, but it's just rubbish for everything else.
That's actually a procedure I was doing on Sunday. The old torso shortener, leg lengthener.
The old vertebrae and the femur move.
Yeah, it was like, hey doc, I want to improve my deadlift. I was like, I got just the thing. Come with me, I'll anaesthetize you.
Can you reverse it?
Oh,
I
no.
can take my shins and put them...
You can't take rib out of femur, can you? I mean, don't be ridiculous.
Just not done.
Yeah. This is going to be such a disappointing question now. It's so serious.
We're disappointed, so it's okay.
It is. Just simply, if you weren't where you were now, so you're, I don't know, younger, just starting out in the fitness industry, thinking of maybe moving online or not moving offline, and you could give yourself kind of a single piece of advice, what would that be?
Plan for success. I would probably give myself that advice. You know, like, it was something I've actually realized throughout this conversation is that most of the stressors I've had were because I was like, well, we'll see what happens. It probably won't work, and then I'm like, oh God, what do I do? You know? So yeah, I think play some chess, not checkers. Save yourself some stress.
Yeah. I think obviously we haven't written best-selling books and all that sort of stuff. But I think we, in our own small way, weren't ready for the client load that we had. And like the conversation, what you were saying before about, you reach this point where you've got 40 clients and you just kind of, falling asleep on your, like, drop 10 grams of carbs. That, I think we definitely reached that point and then had to try and like unpick our way out of it, which is probably the worst part of running Propane. Definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, when I say plan for success, I don't even mean like wild, like celebrity status. I just mean like, okay, you open a gym. What do you do when you get the most members possible? Like, what's your plan in maybe a couple years to open a second location or expand? It could be, it's success on every level. Because I think a lot of people don't, and that's a good stoic practice, but to deal with the potential failure. But at the same time, like, you probably want to deal with things if things go well, and I think it'll help you appreciate the journey. It'll help you also visualize that and have a plan for it. And like, original success for us was getting to actually be able to, have a legitimate side income. And then eventually it was, we can actually quit our main job and be primary coaches. And then for me, it was like, oh, I'm actually smart enough to do a master's, So there's so many little levels along the way where I would have been served by at least entertaining the idea that I might be successful at the given goal.
It's hard to stay stoic when like you open Slack or whatever the client management service is, and it's like, oh God, there's so many messages to deal with. So yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think just like a public, like, thanks to you for, I think, allowing us to, I don't think we would have done this. I don't think we'd have done Propane if you hadn't kind of encouraged us to do it. So thanks.
Just be an accountant and a doctor.
That's exactly what we'd be doing, procedures to lengthen people's legs.
And then you'd be helping manage his money from all the tibia rib exchanges.
Maybe we should set up a specialist clinic, like deadlift increasing surgery.
The deadlift doc.
It's my specialty.
Like, oh, you have a doctorate and you can deadlift a lot. Like, no. That's like 3 other guys, not me.
No, I will literally doctor your deadlift.
And I really appreciate that. It's a true honor to hear that.
Well,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you
great
so
timing.
much for coming on as well.
Somebody is at my door, and I don't know who it is.
Really, at 10? Wow. Sort of it's the time of night when someone knocks on your door. It's a bit weird, bit concerning.
I know. I'm a bit worried.
Yeah.
So I better go answer
that. Good luck. This will be your last podcast ever.
Could be.
Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coming on. Where can people find out more about you, hear more from you?
Yeah, so 3dmusclejourney.com is probably the best website to go to start. That's the number 3, the letter D, then musclejourney.com. From there, you can find links to the research review that I mentioned, my books, 3DMJ coaching, my blog post, the 3DMJ podcast. And then if you want to hear Iron Culture podcast, we're on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. And then finally, if you want to follow my daily content, or most of the time daily content, that's at Helms 3DMJ on Instagram.
Wonderful.
I'm
really
not
sorry.
Eric, at your...
It's the supermarket man. He's getting irate. I'm going to have to dash.
All right.
Eric, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Watching Yusuf slowly try to, is it rude? Is it rude for me to go?